we would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Here we are, a sudden strangeness, a huge silence. The pandemic has shut down New York City and London, villages in Italy and towns in China. And the GTA is shutting down too, although you wouldn't know it from the lineups at the Tim Hortons drive-thrus. I live near the 407 and under a flight path to Pearson. And so highway noise and airplane engines are the constant background to my life at home. And now I hear birdsong, and pretty much only birdsong outside. And I like hearing the birds, very much so. And that does make me wonder about other ways we might begin to live. Perhaps this isn't the time to upload ourselves entirely into virtual reality. Perhaps this is not the time to keep working the way we used to work, to try and recreate all of our activities on Zoom, to keep up the pace of before, when walking fast and talking faster was the sign of a productive citizen. Perhaps it is the time to hear birdsong in the silence. Now, I know not everyone can hear the birds. Those of you in healthcare have more being asked of you than ever before, and you will be working full out in the days to come. And those of you who have had hours reduced or been laid off entirely may have alarm bells clanging in your head. Your illness may be filling up yourself with noise and fear. And I hope that those of you who are ill find moments without fear to breathe and be. And I think even of those of you still driving to work must see the difference on the highways. And I hope that those with alarm bells clanging have moments when you can hear the birds singing. Because I think that that's what matters, to hear the birds during this sudden, strange silence. We've had to make new routines, abandon our plans, and shift our lives around without our normal social connections. And from what I've heard on the news this week, this isn't going to change anytime soon. We will be living like this at least for the rest of April, and possibly longer. So how do we make the best of this huge silence that has enveloped us and make some of it at least a gift? Neruda says, perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Perhaps this is a time to breathe and reflect, an opportunity to understand yourself and tend to your life. And I know that can sound kind of silly, but how many of us really do pay attention to how we live our lives? How intentional really are we? I know I get into a routine and just keep going. We let our jobs shape everything we do, and we watch TV and scroll through social media. It just becomes our default. How often do we stop and truly check in with ourselves to see if we are happy, if we're living our values, if our relationships are healthy, to look at the life and tend to the life that we have grown around ourselves? Like trees, we have both our public life and roots underneath. And I think in times of crisis, we discover where we have put our roots, what holds us in place, keeping us steady. And it seems to me that we've been living in this time in this society where all the attention is on the tree canopy, on the outward displays of productivity, accomplishment, wealth. But we forget about our roots, those essentials that keep us human and connected. And while the colossal pandemic hurricane is blowing away the leaves and breaking the branches, it's our roots that will keep us standing. Roots that keep us dug deep in, even as we're blown about in the hurricane. The roots of cooking and cleaning and caring, those housekeeping, keeping house, those traditional women's work that has been devalued, that really is now shaping our days. Roots like hobbies pursued simply for delight and learning. Roots like spirituality, being restored by connecting to the mystery and wonder of all that is. And so as we pause again for a musical gift from Helen, I invite you to take this time to consider your roots. What keeps you standing during the storm? I've always sort of thought of trees as solitary creatures, and I love those old trees that stand all on their own, spreading out into the full glory of their canopy. And my grade school science taught me that trees in a forest compete for every speck of sunlight, pushing each other aside. And so I think that's been my understanding of trees, solitary and competitive. And while there's probably some truth in those images, most trees are actually part of complex communities. Trees may look like individuals above the ground, but in a forest under the soil, they connect through their roots. Their roots reach out to one another and connect through fungal filaments. And recent science suggests that they sort of not necessarily talk to each other, but interact with one another. Older trees bolster the saplings around them by sharing sugars, and trees with shallow root systems will entwine their roots so that together they're stronger. And I don't think we are so different from trees. We look like individuals, separate and independent, but we are all connected to and dependent on others. I suspect many of you thought of friends and family when you considered your roots, because we are held up by those who are around us with our roots entwined, and we try to send our energy to those who need it the most. And I hope also some of you consider UCM to be part of your root system of support. And I know that I found myself feeling better after check-ins with you and with my colleagues. It's a joy to remember that I am not alone, that there's life and activity abounding even in this shutdown. And I am feeling much gratitude these days for Unitarian Universalism and its steady theology. The chalice light, its glowing light, reminds me that life is abundant, even as it flares and flickers. And UU theology is rooted in the wisdom of the earth, and springtime calls us to pay attention to the gifts of sunlight and soil. Even when all seems dead, seeds were sprouting and growing, pushing up and up through the dark. Snowdrops and crocuses and daffodils are now emerging from the soil. And in time, the trees will fill out with leaves and we will return to busy lives. The seasons will change. We will get through this and emerge. But for now, perhaps our work does need to be underground. Perhaps it's time to care for our roots, to stretch ourselves out to the essentials which provide the strength for us to stay steady in the storm. For me, those essentials are things like good conversations with friends and family, making a great meal, creating art that feeds the spirit. Maybe it's meditation for you or advocating for a cause dear to your heart. Tend to the essentials which root you to the vitality of being. And know that roots hold steadier when they're entwined with the roots of other trees. Resilience grows out of our own ability to manage tough times. It's an individual sort of upwelling, but it also arises from being part of a community. And I know that I'm stronger when I tap into that extended network of UUs across Canada and the world. We exchange energy and information and shore each other up through calls, through music, through just knowing we're going through this together. And my hope is always that each of you finds strength in being here together. That those of you who are hurting feel nurtured. Those of you who are anxious find some peace. And it seems to me that this is the role of religion in a crisis, to maintain community, to care for one another, and to lift up our collective strength and resilience, no matter what the future holds. We have weeks, perhaps months to go as this COVID-19 hurricane ripples through. And there will be terrible days and good days. And so I invite you to consider your roots and tend to them with love and intention. Find what brings you steadiness and strength. And know that when you aren't able to be resilient, when those storm winds overwhelm, know that we are connected even underground in the dark, and we are sending you energy and support. And when you're able to feel the huge silence, this avenue to mystery, listen to the birds singing and watch the earth turning green. And hold this truth in your heart. We are all together in this sudden strangeness. So say we all.